If I may, briefly, can we discuss the C word? Is that something we can discuss? Do you feel
That
comfortable?
depends which one it is. Go for it.
um, Obviously, there's a lot out there at the moment about coronavirus.
Yeah.
Obviously, fortunately, we're in the position now to have a vaccine. So my question is kind of twofold: is, you know, what would you say to people now in terms of the next couple months, from a virology standpoint, a viral standpoint? We're not out of the woods, um, but should people be concerned about this vaccine?
So I want to preface this first of all. I am not a virologist, so I'm at its
Appreciate
core
that. Yeah.
an evolutionary biologist. I have done virology. I know a fair amount about how vaccines work, but just to preface it, that there may be some technical jargon that I'm not using or whatever else. The vaccine itself isn't something for people to necessarily worry about. As in, so there is a narrative being peddled by the media predominantly that like, and it's going to sound stupid when I first say it and before I explain it, vaccines aren't about you as an individual. Vaccines are about your community. So with regards to dealing with viruses, you have two options. Okay, well, three options. The first one is you can hide away indoors and never come into contact with another human being. Now that's not possible, right? You cannot live in the society we inhabit now and do that because one, how are you going to eat? And two, you're going to become so incredibly depressed. Like we just saw that during the first lockdown, right? Like imagine if you do that and you actually never see anyone. So that's an option that's not feasible. The second option is you can develop what they call herd immunity. Now, what that means is everyone gets the virus and then hopefully they can't get it again. But with a virus that has a death rate as high as the current coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, a lot of people are going to die. So at that point, if you have to have 80% of your population get it, well, we're going to have a lot more dead people than 60,000 or whatever we have now. You're looking at hundreds of thousands of people. And not all of those are old. Not all of those are people who are already sick. They could be children with disabilities. They could be young adults with disabilities. And we can touch again on that whole genocide thing, but that's essentially what you're advocating. You're saying if you're weak, and once again in inverted commas, because just because you may have an underlying condition doesn't mean that you're not like totally capable of being happy and doing whatever you want to do, then you die. And so that's the second option. And anyone who wants to live in a society who genuinely cares about the people around them should not advocate for that. There are plenty of people who do. Generally, they tend to be quite selfish and believe that they won't be the one who dies or they won't be affected by it. The Lawrence Foxes of the world. Now, your third option is you vaccinate. And what vaccination does is it does the second thing. It gives you herd immunity, but no one dies. Okay. And I think when you look at those three options, that's obviously the best one, right? Like everyone can't get sick and they don't die. Like every year we vaccinate people for the flu. And that's why when everyone was going, oh, coronavirus hasn't killed more people than the flu. Well, no, rather, sorry, coronavirus hasn't killed more. Sorry, let me reword this because I've accidentally just said something I didn't mean to. Yeah, when people were saying initially, oh, coronavirus has, I'm not going to actually touch on that because it becomes contentious.
No, definitely.
Yes, so it's essentially you're providing a get out clause through a vaccine. And the thing is, vaccines do not pass regulatory approval unless they are safe at the most fundamental level. Now, some people don't believe vaccines are safe for a few reasons, okay? Generally, there are two. The first one is that back in the 1990s, there was the Wakefield scandal, where a guy called Andrew Wakefield tried to publish a scientific paper which hadn't been properly peer reviewed, which had a tiny sample size and was based almost entirely on anecdotal evidence that the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine caused autism. Now, it's very easy from anecdotal evidence to go, well, my child didn't seem to have autistic tendencies when they were 1, and then they had a vaccine at 1.5, and then by the time they were 4, they had autism. Well, babies don't present autistic symptoms. So, and it's very easy to tie things based on anecdotal evidence. And it's why in science, we tend not to do that. You have large sample sizes and you go, there's 1 million people. And if if all of them have the MMR vaccine and then like 90% of them end up with autism, then yeah, there's an undeniable correlation there, but that didn't happen. So that's the first one. And the second reason people don't trust vaccines is that if you look at the ingredients on, well, it's lack of understanding. If you look at the ingredients on the back of a vaccine, you'll notice that in some of them there's a stabilizing agent, which I think it says mercury thiosulfate or something. And it's like, well, mercury, that's toxic. Okay, that made people go crazy. With a basic understanding of chemistry, you can understand that, well, mercury may be problematic when it's in compound form. That stops being so much of a problem. But then what that second point comes down to is poor communication. It's the fact that the press make an awful lot of money from people clicking on their articles. And therefore, when they start writing about the issues with vaccinations and the fact that this got regulatory approval really, really quickly, that then makes people concerned. And when they only read headlines on Facebook, that propagates this myth. So back to the question, should people get vaccinated? Essentially, yes. But you're going to have to wait your turn because we can only produce so many vaccines so quickly. And obviously the government and governments all around the world are prioritizing people who are more likely to die of the illness. This isn't going away anytime soon. We're probably looking at, I reckon personally, spring. We may even have another lockdown before that point, especially if Christmas is a little bit crazy and people muck about a new year. But like there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that does come through vaccination. And there will be lots of people who don't get vaccinated. I think about between 5 and 6 million people in the UK are members of anti-vaccination groups on Facebook. That's like 10% of the population. That's a lot of people. Now, fortunately, that's not enough people to completely ruin the vaccination effort. But I think if scientists and journalists actually bothered to take the time to sit down with these people and not just say they're idiots and not just criticize them and tell them what they're doing is so awful, listen to them, understand where their concerns come from and bother actually dealing with that issue, we could resolve this whole anti-vax movement, generally speaking. So yeah, it's the C word isn't going away, but it will be in a short time, hopefully.